Before the thunder of cannons, before the skies over Europe became battlefields of steel and fire, there was only silence. And in that silence, the dream of a new kind of flight was being forged. The year is 1934. The scars of the Great War still carve deep lines across Europe. The world speaks of peace, but in Germany, whispers grow louder. Whispers of rebirth, of power, of the skies once again filled with the roar of engines. The Treaty of Versailles had chained Germany's military ambitions. Yet behind closed doors, in laboratories and workshops, a generation of engineers refused to let their nation's spirit rust away. They believed the future of war would belong not to the trenches, but to the clouds. Among them stood a man whose name would become legend, Willy Messerschmitt. Ambitious, obsessive, and unrelenting. His eyes saw the sky not as a limit, but as a battlefield waiting to be mastered. In a modest factory in Augsburg, he and his small team at Bayerische Flugzeugwerke began sketching lines that would change history. Thin pencil marks on drafting paper, forming shapes so advanced they looked almost alien for their time. What he envisioned wasn't just another airplane. It was an extension of human instinct, a weapon of precision, balance, and speed. A machine that would move like a falcon and strike like a dagger. Messerschmitt believed in one thing: simplicity through perfection. Every rivet, every curve, every bolt mattered. Weight was the enemy, drag was sin. The result was something elegant, almost delicate, but built with the heart of a predator. In 1935, that dream took form. The Bf 109 V1 prototype, sleek, narrow, its nose housing the revolutionary Daimler-Benz DB601 engine, stood on the runway for the first time. To the untrained eye, it looked fragile, too small, too thin, too light. But those who saw it fly would never forget the moment it left the ground. With a deafening roar, it broke free from gravity's grip, cutting through the air with unnatural speed and grace. It didn't just rise, it leapt, slicing the clouds open like a blade through silk. For a moment, there was silence. A silence that spoke louder than any applause. The observers on the ground knew they were witnessing something dangerous, something alive. The Bf 109 wasn't just an aircraft. It was a statement, a declaration that Germany's wings had returned. Soon after, tests revealed its terrifying potential. Speeds exceeding 340 miles per hour, unmatched climb rates, and agility that made even the most skilled pilots sweat. It turned tighter, climbed faster, and struck harder than anything the Allies possessed. Inside its narrow cockpit, everything was built for efficiency. Instruments wrapped tight around the pilot's body. The canopy offered a near 360-degree view, perfect for the hunter's eye. Guns were mounted close to the nose, ensuring every round hit precisely where the pilot aimed. It wasn't forgiving. It demanded precision, strength, and instinct. To fly the Bf 109 was to walk a razor's edge. It could reward mastery or punish hesitation. Pilots described it as alive, a creature that responded to touch and fear alike. It could stall violently, spin out of control, or soar like a god, depending on the hands that guided it. And Messerschmitt wanted it that way. To him, engineering was not about comfort, it was about domination. His fighter would not carry the weak, it would create the strong. As the machine evolved, so did the ambitions behind it. Germany's rearmament accelerated under the new regime. Hidden beneath the banners and propaganda, factories multiplied and airfields expanded. Young pilots were trained not as men, but weapons. The Luftwaffe was born, and the Bf 109 would be its blade. By 1937, the fighter had already proven itself in combat. Over the skies of Spain during the Spanish Civil War, the Condor Legion put it to the ultimate test. Facing Soviet-built Polikarpovs, the 109 carved its name into the clouds. Reports came back drenched in awe. Enemy aircraft shredded in seconds. Dogfights decided before they even began. The world took notice. Britain, France, America all realized too late that the next war would belong to whoever ruled the air. Back in Augsburg, Messerschmitt refined his creation. Stronger engines, lighter frames, deadlier weapons. The machine evolved with every iteration. The Bf-109B, C, D, and finally the E model, the E-mill as pilots would call it. Each generation more ruthless than the last. In the hangars, men in flight suits ran their hands along the wings, whispering to the metal like it was alive. It gleamed under dim light, silver, sleek, and silent. The aircraft seemed to hum, waiting for war. Across Europe, nations watched uneasily as the Reich's factories roared day and night. The Allies spoke of peace, of treaties, of diplomacy, but Germany was already building its storm. And the Bf-109 would be at the center of it, fast, agile, and deadly enough to turn the tide of any battle. In less than 5 years, it would become the most produced fighter in history, more than 33,000 built. But in this moment, in 1938, it was still new, still untested on the scale of what was coming. The pilots trained under an empire's eye, their confidence fueled by propaganda and pride. They flew formation drills, lightning dives, and gunnery tests over quiet fields that would soon echo with war. And as the last sunsets of peace faded over Europe, the Bf-109's shadow stretched longer across the ground. It was the symbol of a nation rising and the instrument of its coming fury. Soon, the world would learn that this was not merely a fighter plane. It was a machine born for conquest. The blade had been forged. The sky had found its predator. And when the storm finally broke, the Messerschmitt Bf-109 would be the first to strike, the sharp edge of a war that would set the heavens on fire.
When the storm broke, it came without warning. Dawn, September 1st, 1939. The silence of Europe was shattered by the sound of engines. Across the eastern sky, hundreds of aircraft roared toward Poland, a coordinated strike so fast, so overwhelming, that the world struggled to comprehend what it was seeing. It was not an invasion in the traditional sense. It was lightning, the blitzkrieg. The Bf-109, sleek and silver, led the way. It dove from the clouds like a blade from heaven, its machine guns blazing, its engines howling. In minutes, Polish airfields were torn apart, hangars burning, planes destroyed before they could even take off. The world had never seen air power used like this before. Fast, decisive, merciless. To the German High Command, it was proof of everything they believed, that air superiority could win wars before they even began, and the Bf-109 was the weapon that made it possible. In the first weeks of the war, the Luftwaffe claimed hundreds of victories. The skies were theirs. Pilots spoke of it like a hunt, the speed, the precision, the thrill of the chase. They called themselves Jäger, hunters, and the Bf-109 was their trusted companion. But beneath the glory lay something darker. For every victory, the 109 demanded its price. Its narrow landing gear made takeoffs treacherous. Its powerful torque could flip it on the runway. A moment's hesitation, a slight miscalculation, and the hunter became the hunted. Yet still they flew. By 1940, the war machine had turned west. Denmark, Norway, Holland, Belgium, France. Each campaign was a masterclass in blitzkrieg, a symphony of speed and coordination, tanks, infantry, and aircraft moving as one. And at the center of that symphony, screaming through the skies, was the Messerschmitt Bf-109. In France, the Allies never stood a chance. The Luftwaffe controlled the air from dawn until dusk. Dogfights flared above the fields of Flanders, above Paris, above Dunkirk. Pilots like Werner Mulders, Adolf Golland, and Günther Lutzow rose to fame, each becoming an ace, men who racked up dozens of victories, their names plastered on propaganda posters as heroes of the Reich. Their mounts, always the 109, became symbols of invincibility. The aircraft's shark-like silhouette, its narrow wings and long nose were feared by anyone who dared face it. For a time, the world seemed powerless before it. By the summer of 1940, France had fallen. The swastika flew over Paris, and now there was only one enemy left between Germany and domination of Europe, the island nation across the Channel, Britain. The stage was set for one of the greatest aerial battles in history, the Battle of Britain. Never before had air power alone decided the fate of nations. The Luftwaffe prepared to sweep the RAF from the sky. Waves of bombers would hit airfields, radar stations, and cities, escorted by the sleek, deadly 109s. It seemed inevitable. The Bf 109 was faster, higher flying, more advanced than the British Spitfires and Hurricanes. On paper, victory was assured. But the sky has a way of humbling arrogance. In July 1940, as the first raids crossed the Channel, the German pilots faced something they hadn't yet encountered, a rival that could fight them on equal terms. The Supermarine Spitfire. Beautiful, agile, and perfectly matched to the 109's speed, it turned the battle into something entirely new, a duel of equals, a clash of titans. The British pilots, outnumbered but flying over home soil, fought with unmatched fury. Every kill meant survival. Every mission meant defending their families, their cities, their country. And as the dogfights intensified, the weaknesses of the 109 began to show. Its range was limited, too short to escort bombers deep into Britain. Once the 109s reached London, they had only minutes of combat time before fuel forced them to turn back. Many never made it home. The British radar system, too, gave the RAF an advantage. They could track incoming raids, scramble fighters at the perfect time, and strike before the bombers arrived. For the first time, the hunters became the hunted. German pilots described it as flying into a storm of invisible death. Anti-aircraft guns from below, Spitfires from above, and no clear escape. The Luftwaffe began losing men and morale. The propaganda in Berlin still shouted of victory, but the truth was written in smoke across the English sky. By October 1940, the Battle of Britain was lost. Germany would never again gain full control of the air. And yet, the Bf 109 remained the backbone of the Luftwaffe. Even in defeat, it proved something crucial, that the aircraft itself was formidable, unmatched in pure performance, but bound by the limits of the strategy that used it. After the battle, the 109 was refined again. New models rolled out. The F-Series, sleeker, faster, more aerodynamic, the one many pilots would later call the finest version ever built. Its engine was upgraded, its armament balanced, its range slightly improved. The F model was more than a machine. It was an answer, Germany's defiance made manifest in metal and flame. The world now knew the Messerschmitt 109 was no temporary marvel. It was here to stay. As 1941 approached, its wings carried it to new frontiers. Over the deserts of North Africa, the icy tundra of Russia, the skies of the Balkans and Greece, everywhere it flew, it brought both fear and respect. Its howl, that distinctive high-pitched wail of the Daimler-Benz engine, became the soundtrack of invasion. Soldiers on the ground would look up and know instantly whether friend or foe approached. And for the enemies of Germany, the sight of that narrow cross on the wings meant one thing: danger. But even as victory followed victory, cracks began to form in the illusion of invincibility. The 109's success was no longer about innovation, it was about endurance. It would now have to face not only the Spitfire, but the coming flood of Allied designs that would change the air war forever. For now, though, in 1940 and 1941, the Bf 109 stood unmatched. It had carried Germany through its age of conquest, from the fields of Poland to the coasts of France. It was the sharp edge of blitzkrieg, the perfect embodiment of speed, power, and precision. And though storms were gathering beyond the horizon, for a fleeting moment, it ruled the sky. This was the Messerschmitt's empire, an empire of air and flame, and the world had only just begun to feel its edge.
By 1941, the Messerschmitt Bf 109 stood as a masterpiece of engineering, a perfect intersection of art, war, and ambition. In every hangar across occupied Europe, the fighter waited like a coiled predator, metal skin glinting under cold fluorescent light, black crosses etched across its wings like silent vows of vengeance. It had become the face of German air power, a symbol recognized and feared across every front. But perfection is never still. Even as the Reich celebrated its dominance, a quiet war was brewing. A race not of bullets, but of blueprints, of engineers chasing seconds and meters per second. Because in war, yesterday's masterpiece is tomorrow's museum piece. Evolution of the Predator. The Luftwaffe's engineers knew it. The Spitfires were faster, the Hurricanes tougher. The Soviets were building newer fighters by the month. The Messerschmitt had to evolve, or die. And so the workshops of Augsburg came alive once again. Drafting tables flooded with sketches, rulers scraping across paper, cigarettes burning down to ash as minds raced against time. They refined everything: the wings, the tail, the engine, even the bolts. Every ounce of weight was questioned, every line redrawn. From that obsession was born a new variant, the Bf 109F, nicknamed Friedrich. It was sleeker, smoother, faster. The clunky armored nose was gone, replaced by a rounded spinner that cut through the air with graceful precision. The edges that once looked mechanical now appeared organic, like the wings of a bird crafted by nature itself. To fly it was to understand flight at its purest form. It wasn't a machine anymore. It was instinct given shape. When the throttle opened, the roar of the Daimler-Benz DB601E engine surged like thunder, 1,350 horsepower tearing through the sky. It could outclimb, outturn, and outfight anything the Allies had. For a brief moment, Germany had built something flawless. Masters of the sky. Across Europe, the Bf 109F reigned supreme. It led dogfights over the Channel, chased bombers over the deserts of North Africa, and hunted Soviet aircraft over the endless Russian plains. In the North African desert, the 109 became a golden falcon. Its fuselage painted sand yellow, its engine filters enlarged to breathe through the dust. It hunted across the dunes, where the horizon blurred, and every dogfight became a mirage of death. Pilots like Hans Joachim Marcel, the Star of Africa, turned the 109 into legend. He scored 158 victories, often downing multiple aircraft in a single sortie. Witnesses said he could destroy an enemy with 3 bursts of gunfire, precise, clean, effortless. He treated air combat not as war, but as an art. Each maneuver, each roll, each dive, deliberate and exact. His aircraft became an extension of his heartbeat. But even the greatest predators are hunted in turn. The desert sun that gilded the 109 also punished it. Engines overheated, tires melted, dust clogged the radiators. Every flight was a gamble between mastery and mechanical failure. Still, the Messerschmitt endured, because that's what it was built to do, to survive where others couldn't. The Eastern Tempest. While the golden sands tested its endurance, the eastern skies tested its soul. Operation Barbarossa, June 22, 1941. The dawn that would ignite the largest invasion in history. 3 million German soldiers, thousands of tanks, and above them, a storm of aircraft. The Messerschmitt Bf 109 led the charge. In the first days, it was a massacre. Soviet airfields were destroyed on the ground, entire squadrons wiped out before their engines even warmed. The 109s ruled the sky, untouchable, unstoppable. But the Soviet Union was not France. It could bleed.
and still fight. The endless distances devoured fuel, engines froze, and soon the Red Air Force adapted. By 1942, new fighters appeared: Yak-1s, Lag-3s, MiG-3s. Crude, underpowered, but countless. They swarmed the skies like hornets. For every German ace that rose, 10 new Soviet pilots took flight. The 109s were still deadly, but now they were outnumbered, sometimes 10 to 1. And yet the German pilots didn't back down. They became ghosts of the sky, striking from the clouds, vanishing into the sun. It wasn't about conquest anymore. It was about survival and legacy. The birth of the ace. From these desperate battles emerged names that would define aerial war forever. Erich Hartmann, a quiet, disciplined young pilot with golden hair and ice-blue eyes. He wasn't reckless, he wasn't loud, he was methodical, calculated, patient. He studied his prey, waited for the perfect moment, and when he struck, it was always fatal. Hartmann would go on to claim 352 aerial victories, the highest in history, all in the Messerschmitt Bf 109. His motto was simple: see, decide, attack, break away. A deadly mantra born from discipline and the perfection of his machine. Others followed: Gerhard Barkhorn, Günter Rall, Walter Nowotny. Men who lived and died in the cockpit, bonded to their aircraft like soul to body. For them, the 109 was not a tool. It was a partner, a weapon of shared instinct. They respected it, feared it, loved it. But perfection has a price. The Bf 109's brilliance came with flaws. Its landing gear, narrow and fragile, made takeoffs treacherous. A single crosswind could flip the plane during landing. Novice pilots often crashed before ever seeing combat. And as the war dragged on, Germany's training programs grew shorter. 18-year-olds, barely taught the basics, were thrown into cockpits once reserved for the elite. The plane that once demanded mastery now demanded miracles. And meanwhile, the Allies were evolving. New Spitfires, the Mark 9s, appeared, faster and deadlier. The Americans brought the P-47 Thunderbolt and soon the P-51 Mustang, sleek, long-range hunters with powerful engines and guns that could tear through steel. The air that once belonged to the 109 now burned with tracers from every direction. The Gustav, strength and sacrifice. To survive, Messerschmitt pushed the design further. In 1942 came the Bf 109G, the Gustav. It was heavier, tougher, with more armor and firepower. It could carry 30mm cannons, a single hit enough to destroy a bomber. But all that power came with a cost. The aircraft had gained muscle and lost grace. It no longer danced through the air. It fought its way through it. Veteran pilots felt the change instantly. The controls were stiffer, the climb slower. It was still deadly, but no longer effortless. And yet they flew it, because they had no choice. Every mission grew more desperate, every victory more costly. By 1943, Germany's enemies were everywhere, from the Arctic to Africa, from the Channel to Stalingrad. The sky itself seemed to close in. But still, the Messerschmitt flew. The sky turns red. By 1944, the war had reached a fever pitch. The Allies rained destruction upon Germany's cities. Thousands of bombers filled the sky, B-17 flying fortresses and Lancasters, escorted by swarms of P-47s. The Luftwaffe scrambled what few pilots it had left. They rose in 109s patched together from spare parts, fueled by the last reserves of a dying empire. Many never returned. Some never even saw their targets, cut down by Mustangs before they could climb to altitude. But even in the final days, the Bf 109 refused to fade. There were moments, rare, fleeting, when it struck back, reminding the world of what it once was. A veteran ace diving through a formation of bombers, cannons blazing, wings trailing smoke. A single fighter against an endless sky. It was the last echo of perfection, fighting against the inevitable. Legacy of the Blade. When the war ended in 1945, the Messerschmitt Bf 109 had been built in over 33,000 units. No other fighter in history matched its legacy. And its story didn't end there. In Spain, production continued under license as the Hispano HA 1112, powered by British Merlin engines, the same used by its old rival, the Spitfire. In Czechoslovakia, it was reborn as the Avia S-199, flown later by the newborn Israeli Air Force in 1948, a poetic twist of fate that saw German design fighting for Jewish survival. Even decades after its first flight, the shape of the 109 inspired generations of...
By 1944, the empire that once ruled the skies was dying. The eagles of the Luftwaffe, once symbols of dominance and precision, now struggled just to take flight. The Messerschmitt Bf 109, once the sharpest blade in Germany's arsenal, stood against the storm one final time. But this was no longer a war of aces. It was a war of survival. The sky turns against them. Europe was burning. Cities flattened. Factories in ruins. The hum of the Luftwaffe's great machine, once thunderous, now came in broken echoes. Fuel was scarce. Pilots were scarcer. The Allied bombers came in waves. Flying fortresses, liberators, Lancasters, filling the heavens like black clouds before a storm. Each one escorted by swarms of P-51 Mustangs and Spitfires, sleek predators with engines that could sing death across the continent. And below them, Germany's airfields burned. The once mighty Luftwaffe, that had crushed France and dominated the Battle of Britain's early skies, was now a shadow of itself. Its aces were gone, dead, captured, or exhausted. In their place stood boys, barely 18, pulled from schoolrooms, given a few hours of training and sent into the air. They flew the Bf 109G, or whatever could still fly. Often patched together from wreckage, cannibalized for parts. Their missions were suicide, dressed in patriotism. And yet they went, because that was all they could do. The machine that outlived its empire. The Bf 109 had evolved again, this time into the K variant, the Kurfürst. It was the last breath of perfection. 2,000 horsepower, improved aerodynamics, faster than ever before. On paper, it was magnificent. In reality, it was too late. There were no skilled pilots left to master it, no fuel to test its limits, no factories left to produce it in numbers that mattered. It was like a sword reforged in the middle of a burning castle. As Allied raids crippled the industrial heart of Germany, the Messerschmitt became a ghost, a symbol of a dream that refused to die, but couldn't live either. The thunder over Europe. By early 1944, the Allied bombing campaign reached its crescendo. Massive formations, hundreds of bombers at once, stretched across the sky, escorted by Mustangs that had range enough to follow them deep into the heart of Germany. They came for everything: rail lines, oil fields, airfields, factories, cities. The Luftwaffe tried to resist, but the mathematics were cruel. For every Allied plane shot down, 10 more took its place. For every German pilot lost, there was no replacement. The sky had turned red, not with victory, but with fire and blood. The 109 pilots who remained, the veterans, the survivors, flew with fury and despair,
They would take off knowing that odds meant death. They would climb toward bomber formations the size of entire towns, alone or in pairs, their guns loaded, their minds empty. Each sortie was not about winning the war anymore. It was about dignity. One last defiant roar before the silence. The arrival of the jet age. As the world above descended into chaos, a new shadow emerged below: jet propulsion. In hidden hangars and underground tunnels, German engineers worked tirelessly on something revolutionary. A fighter powered not by pistons, but by flame itself. The Messerschmitt Me-262, the world's first operational jet fighter, was born. It could fly faster than any propeller aircraft alive. When it appeared, Allied pilots called it the Silver Swallow and feared it like a phantom. But for the Bf-109, it was the writing on the wall. Its era was over. The 109 had been the king of the skies for nearly a decade, but the world had moved forward. The new war was being fought by machines that no longer needed propellers. The eagles of the Luftwaffe were watching the horizon and realizing they were no longer the hunters, but the past.
The war ended, but the wind still whispered the name Messerschmitt. The skies above Europe were quiet now. The roar of engines was gone, replaced by silence, heavy, endless, almost sacred. Yet beneath that silence, a legacy stirred. A legacy forged not just in steel and fire, but in ambition. The aftermath of a fallen empire. In 1945, Germany was broken. Its cities were rubble, its factories ash, its symbols stripped away. The Luftwaffe was no more, but its creations remained. Dozens of Bf-109s lay scattered across airfields and forests. Some were captured intact, others half-buried wrecks. To the Allies, they were more than trophies. They were blueprints, windows into the mind of a nation that had once built the fastest, deadliest machines of its age. British and American engineers studied them in awe. They measured the wings, the propellers, the controls. They took apart the Daimler-Benz DB605 engine, marveling at its power, its precision, its brutal simplicity. Even in defeat, the 109 commanded respect, because it wasn't just a plane, it was a philosophy of flight. Echoes across the world. And then something remarkable happened. The Messerschmitt flew again. Captured aircraft were reassembled and flown by Switzerland, Finland, Yugoslavia, Czechoslovakia, Spain, even Israel. The same machine that had once served a dictator now carried the flags of new nations, new stories. In Czechoslovakia, they called it the Avia S-199, rough, unpredictable, but still powerful. In Spain, it was reborn as the Hispano HA-1112 Bouchon, fitted with a Rolls-Royce engine and a new voice. These aircraft, painted in fresh colors, flew long after the war ended, a strange, poetic twist of fate. Enemies and allies alike now shared the same wings. The 109 had outlived its empire. It had transcended ideology. It had become pure aviation. And the dawn of the jet age. But as the 1950s dawned, the skies were changing again. The jet had come to rule. The Me-262's legacy realized in the age of sabers, meters, and MiGs. Propellers faded into nostalgia. The thunder of pistons gave way to the scream of turbines. Yet among the veterans, the pilots, the engineers, the dreamers, there remained a quiet reverence for what had come before. The 109 became a teacher. Its lessons were written into every aircraft that followed: the balance of aerodynamics, the pursuit of efficiency, the intimate dance between power and control. Its DNA was in every modern fighter that rose into the clouds. Even as humanity reached the edge of space, part of the Messerschmitt spirit went with it. Rebirth in memory. Decades passed. Warbirds were forgotten, scrapped, or buried beneath time. But then came a new generation: historians, restorators, enthusiasts who refused to let the legends die. They searched jungles, deserts, and frozen lakes for the remnants of the 109. They found twisted fuselages, rusted engines, shattered canopies. And piece by piece, they brought them back to life. Today, only a handful of original Bf-109s still fly, but when they do, the world listens. At air shows, people look up and fall silent as that distinctive Daimler-Benz growl cuts through the air once more. It's not the sound of war anymore, it's the sound of history breathing. Children cover their ears, veterans close their eyes. And for a moment, the past returns, not as tragedy, but as remembrance. From war machine to work of art. The Bf-109 was born to destroy, but time has reshaped it into something else entirely: a monument to human craftsmanship. Every curve, every rivet, every vibration tells a story about an age when mankind reached for perfection through conflict. Today, museums preserve them behind glass and velvet ropes. Restored aircraft sit gleaming in hangars under soft light. Their swastikas are gone, their meanings transformed. They are not symbols of hate. They are symbols of innovation, engineering, and the eternal human hunger to fly higher. What began as an engine of destruction became a canvas for awe. And so the story of the Messerschmitt Bf-109 ends not in ruin, but in immortality. It remains one of the most produced aircraft in history. It fought in more battles across more skies than almost any machine ever built. But beyond the statistics lies something deeper. It embodies the paradox of creation, that mankind's darkest moments often give birth to its greatest achievements. It reminds us that genius can serve both destruction and beauty, and that history is never black and white, but the gray smoke between them. The Bf-109 is not just an artifact, it's a mirror, reflecting the ambition, pride, and pain of an entire generation. Final words. Every time a Bf-109 lifts off today, it carries with it the souls of those who built it, flew it, and fell beside it. It no longer flies for victory, but for memory. It no longer hunts, but teaches. And as its shadow drifts across the ground, we remember. Machines may fade, empires may fall, but the sky keeps their stories alive. The Messerschmitt Bf-109, born in war, perfected in flight, eternal in legacy. The iron and the sky, forever intertwined.